Hello and welcome to the Colts Blue Zone podcast. I'm Matt Adams. Dave Griffith's out this week, but I am joined by my good friend Mike Chappell. A lot of stuff to talk about. We have a change in ownership for the Colts after the passing of Jim Irsay, so we'll talk about the passing of the torch there to the Irsay daughters. A lot of stuff from minicamp. We heard from coaches, we heard from Steichen, we heard from assistants, we heard from players. We have some injury news to pass forward from last week about Anthony Richardson.
Which is never good.
Never good. And then, like I said, we have plenty to talk about here. And then after that, it's just sort of a dead zone period because the Colts will finish wrapped up their mandatory minicamp today, and then they are done until training camp. So the only real news that we'll see is whether they sign their second-round draft pick, JT Tuimoloau, and almost got it there, I think, close enough anyway. And that's about the only thing, unless they have a free agent signing or something like that. We thought we might see that this week, Mike, with Jermaine Pratt, who was released by the Bengals, but Colts didn't bite on that one. We were surprised by that.
That was, again, when you look at where they are at the end of at the end of their offseason work, the area that needs help is linebacker. It just does.
It's such an obvious need
because you've got your projected starters, Zaire Franklin and Jalen Carlisle. Neither one practiced because of injuries. Franklin, is going to be there because he has been. Carlisle, you just don't know. So it was an area. It still is an area that needs help. And when the Bengals released Jermaine Pratt, I thought, a perfect fit. He, with Lou Anarumo all those years in Cincy, I was told there was an interest, depending on the cost, and he signed for 1 year, $4 million, 4.25
right. with the Raiders,
right?
I think.
And I'm thinking, holy smokes, I would have done that.
And they snapped him up pretty quickly too,
right?
Right.
So, but it's not my team, it's not my money, but when you look at, we talked, was it last week? I think it was, or 2 weeks ago, about the three moves I would make in the offseason.
Yep.
He was one of them.
He was one of them.
Von Bell, sign him, and I'd still trade for a tight end. But, we'll see. Normally after OTAs, it's when they get together, or minicamps, when they get together and say, okay, this is our team, position to position. What do you think? How do you feel comfortable with? I just have a hard time believing that they're comfortable at linebacker.
I can't imagine that they could be, but I guess that's just the break sometimes. The money wasn't there. Maybe they got something else in mind.
Maybe
they really like Cam McGrone. He's gotten a lot of looks. I don't think that's probably the case.
Well, and again, they made it clear they're going to play more DBs and linebackers, right. But you still have to play linebackers. So you're still going to play generally two linebackers.
Because they've Hunter Wohler has gotten a lot of play from them. So, maybe that's where they're comfortable at. And we do know that they do probably plan to play less linebacker. Okay, moving ahead, we did hear this week, I think it was, Tuesday? We heard from Jim Irsay's daughters, Carly Gordon Irsay, Kaylin Jackson, and Casey Foyt as well. And so it's kind of this leadership triumvirate of the Colts franchise right there. Mike, I just wanted to get kind of your thoughts on it, what they said during their availability on Tuesday, and where you see the Colts going forward.
A couple things. A lot of times, not that this happens a lot with sudden ownership changes because of a death, but the pieces have been in place for a long time. This is a family business. This is like, the mom and pop hardware store in Zionsville. And at some point, good old dad's getting the kids involved. That's what this is at a much higher level. I understand it. But each of the daughters made it very clear that they've been involved since an early age.
Yeah, for like decades. Right. Essentially decades they've been kind of preparing for this moment.
I think Caitlin even said that sometimes the dad would bring us into conversations, and at a young age, whatever young age is, teenager, I don't know, 20 years old.
I would assume late teens, early 20s.
And at the time she thought, well, why is he doing this? Well, there was a reason. And and more so over the last 2.5 years, probably, the daughters have really, really been prominent in the running of the franchise because of Jim's health. That's just a fact.
Now, my understanding is that while they're all co-owners or owners of the team, it's really Carly that's kind of the voice to the NFL, right? Because somebody has to be the CEO, the spokesperson for the team.
You had the league rules is you have to have a principal owner in waiting, so to speak. So if something happens like this, then there's a seamless, from the league perspective, ownership transfer. But what's really been important with the daughters is Jim allowed them to sort of find their own way. Carly sort of gravitated to the football.
Right. And on the headset.
Right.
Listening, going to defensive meetings, that sort of thing.
And then Kaylin more so in community outreach, the kicking the stigma, which is going to be a lasting footprint for this family. It just is. And then Casey in marketing as well. But no, it's kind of clear that Carly will be the one to kind of carry the day football-wise, although they said it will be a collaborative effort. They will discuss things, but at the end of the day, somebody has to make the call.
Right.
Well, in the past, that's been Jim Irsay. Even though the daughters by title were owners, it was
Jim's team, right?
Right, and the buck has to stop somewhere. And I have to believe that with major, even minor decisions, that the daughters will talk about it and argue about it, because that's what you do. But at some point, somebody's got to make the call, and I think it's going to be Carly. Whether it's going to be the vote was 1-2, and she was the one. Like with Jim Irsay, when there was a vote, the only vote that matters was his.
Right. Ultimately, it was what Mr. Irsay wanted to do.
So let's not discount all three, but I just think that her interest has always been football. Again, the headsets and being on the field. We see her at training camp, at practices. She's always out there.
And I don't know what you expect the coaches and stuff to say. However, when they're asked about the owner's daughter, who is now the owner of the team, but they're just like, she knows her stuff. She could call plays if we needed her.
She's in our meetings.
She's in our meetings. She asks questions and follow-ups and stuff. So it's not just some casual interest in this team that we have.
Right.
Like, and when do you see this from NFL owners? A lot, the typical image that people have is people sipping cocktails on the yacht, and maybe calling their GM to check in on the budget or something like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
But she is down to brass tacks on stuff with the football team.
Now, whether she's still going to be out there, and one of the questions we didn't ask her is, will you still be on the sidelines on game day? So I don't know. That would be odd that you've got the principal owner on the field.
She's the principal owner now, right? Yeah.
So, but that's what's. And again, one thing I ask her is what did you learn from your father and the core principles? Because Jim always told me that he learned how to be an owner. He calls it stewardship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but he learned how to run a team by watching his dad. In a lot of instances, what not to do, how not to be an owner. And I had to believe the daughters watched their father much, much more good than bad. I mean, there were times when you scratched your head, but she said they're not going to micromanage. And Carly said the same thing that Jim told me like long ago. The keys to being a successful owner is putting the right people in place around you, trusting them, and let them do their jobs. Now, you have input because it's your team. So Carly and the daughters will have input. But if you don't trust your GM, if you don't trust your head coach, what have you got? So I think it's really important. And one person that needs to be mentioned is Pete Ward. He's the chief operating officer. And he knows how to run a football team. He's been Jim's right-hand man since they got here in '84, and Carly made it very clear that Pete's not ready to retire. And when you have an asset like Pete Ward, you lean on him, which they'll do. These are three savvy women, and anyone who sees the fact that three women are running a team and they say, well, these guys are in trouble, they don't understand the dynamics and the background of what these three women have done. They are as ready as you can be for the job of running one of 32 NFL franchises.
Did I misinterpret that somebody asked or they answered something in the regards to Pete Ward about maybe having a team president or something along those lines?
Yeah, I don't know if Carly understood the question. It was, is there a chance that you might hire a team president? To where, again, she's an owner and you're supposed to put people in place. So might you have a team owner or a team president which would be on top of the GM.
Seems like another layer of
which I'm not sure how that works, because then you're undercutting your GM. So ideally, if we fast forward to March, she will have put the right people in place, whether that's keeping Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen, or if it doesn't go well or she doesn't believe it's headed in the right direction, you just blow it up. And if you're going to blow it up, you're going to blow it up.
Well, I mean, she said, Irsay Gordon said, we have a standard here and it hasn't been good enough, which I think Jim Irsay would have said the same thing in recent years for sure. But, and we've talked about this on the podcast before about how much Irsay loved and respected Chris Ballard as a personnel manager, but the results, especially in recent years, have not been there on the field. But does that relationship kind of blind you a little bit, allow you to maybe keep him a little bit longer than maybe you should have? And will the new ownership have that same feeling, or will it come down to, we were 10-7 or we were 7-10, and we've got to do what's best for the franchise as a whole?
The last part, I think a lot of, and some of it is just sort of a feel for how things have been. Jim made a lot of decisions based on emotion and loyalty.
And you also can't discount that in the last couple of years, or last year or so of ownership, how much he wanted to make a change, right? And was capable of wanting to make a change.
And physically, I don't think he was capable of doing that, because then you're talking about GM searches and
research and interviews.
I just don't know that he was physically capable of doing that. So what I came away with, and again, I'm not saying Carly won't use emotions in her decisions, but not to the extent that her father did. I think she's more of a bottom line, fix it person. And everyone should be on high alert this season. They just should be. When she says Chris and Shane know there are things they need to fix, well, they need to fix it. Now, what that means, there was never a fix it or else, but it would be very interesting to know internally what the sisters believe that standard is for this year. Is it playoffs or bust? If you say that, then what if you have injuries? What if there are circumstances? But I think everyone, and I'm not saying that they don't believe in Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen. I think they do. But it's a bottom line business. What Shane is 17-17 with an awful quarterback situation.
Yeah, it's been a without a doubt just a not ideal quarterback situation at all.
But it's been that way since Luck retired, and at a level, that's on the front office. That's on Chris Ballard to have fixed it.
Right, and they tried, but nothing has worked out. Right,
and you get a year or two grace because of the Andrew Luck thing, but not this long. And we thought at the time that they sort of tied their future to Anthony Richardson. And that's would make me very anxious right now.
Well, hey, let's just move right into that topic while we're thinking about it. Anthony Richardson had surgery on that AC joint in his throwing shoulder back in 2023 after taking a hit from Harold Landry. At the time, we thought, well, give him a chance to kind of learn the ropes and all that stuff, but he still had to spend the offseason rehabbing. And then, last year 2, this will be the year that he'll come back and he'll really have learned the game, and we'll see some great things. And we saw some flashes, but generally speaking, the completion percentage that we always talk about, just not there. The consistency, the accuracy, not there. And then the injury stuff, where he gets banged up, can't play, misses games. You've got to make sure you've got a good quarterback, a good backup quarterback. And then even then it's, taps out of the game. So we need to work on this kid's maturity a little bit more and that sort of thing. And now we're faced with what we learned last week after we recorded the podcast, is that Richardson has soreness in his AC joint in his right throwing shoulder, which is the same surgery, which is where he had surgery back in 2023. And we were told, and again, I know that the Colts are not medical doctors, but they essentially said that this was this problem that we identified, we got it fixed, and we're not going to have to worry about that anymore.
Right.
And here we are, in minicamp. Richardson's not able to throw because of that AC shoulder joint problem.
And Shane Steichen mentioned this was from an accumulation of throwing. I think there's every likelihood that he threw too much this offseason.
Probably.
Because it was all about getting better. And
kind of that thoroughbred mentality of just going and going as hard as you can.
But there is absolutely no way that you spin soreness in a quarterback's throwing shoulder positively.
No.
Can't do it.
No.
Can't do it. And this is, again, with a guy who with injuries that have just plagued his development. And so, again, minicamp and the offseason work ended this afternoon. And we will probably not get an update on Richardson, perhaps until they report for training camp July 22nd.
Which they think he might be ready to throw again by then. But that's what they've told us.
But until, Shane Steichen told us that once he's cleared, they'll ease him into throwing.
Right.
So it's not ideal. It's not even remotely ideal. The only thing that would be good is if he's cleared next week to start throwing at some level. But if he's not cleared until August 1st, then he will have missed roughly 2 months of throwing. And then they're going to ease him in.
Going to ramp him up, right?
Right. So, ramp him up. Easing in and ramping up, to me, are different things.
Oh, okay.
Easing in means, slow but sure.
Gotcha.
Ramping up means start throwing the damn ball.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's not ideal at all. I really went into this offseason expecting Richardson to win the competition, to be the opening day starter, and then we'd see. And now I don't know how you have that expectation. My expectation is Daniel Jones. He'll run the first group in the first day of training camp, and barring him being hurt, he's your opening day starter, just because you're going to have the fourth pick in the draft being eased back in at some point. And when is he ramped up? Ramped up to where he's throwing full speed all the time. Throw hard on Monday and then come back on Tuesday and throw. So you're not going to know. It's never. I've always said that I understand that the open competition is great for camp, for football, not at
QB,
not at place kicking, and not at QB. And it's not good when your QB or your pitcher has soreness in his business arm. It just isn't.
I mean, my first thought from hearing that last week was, oh, great, here we go again. I'm sure that a lot of the fan base feels the same way on that. And I'm not like a bold, you've been with me on the podcast. I'm not a bold take type of guy, but I felt like this is it for Richardson. And I know it's way too early to say that, but I'm like, get yourself ready for a big dose of Daniel Jones. That's the guy who's going to be throwing the ball at minicamp. That's probably who you're going to see primarily in training camp and preseason, and he's going to end up being your day one starter, because you just cannot, unfortunately, rely on Richardson's health.
That's sort of unfair to Richardson, but it's totally understandable.
It's totally unfair to Richardson.
There've been a handful of players through the years. For whatever reason, my mind went back to E.G. Green, a really good receiver.
Yeah, he was. Yes, he was.
And he could never stay healthy.
Couldn't stay healthy. Nope.
And he comes out the next year, and the second practice, he's got a boot on his ankle or whatever. And if you can't stay on the field, you can't play. And like I said, it would be hard to debate in favor of Richardson, simply because, yes, because of the inefficiency, but the injuries. Mm-hmm. It's like we talked. It's like we talked to JuJu Brents the last few days. Injuries have just totally disrupted his progress in his early career.
Yeah, like they were drafted in the same year,
right?
And it is essentially, JuJu is unfortunately sort of the defensive equivalent of Richardson. Highly talented, great athlete, can make exceptional plays on the field. The problem is not on the field enough to do that. We'll talk a little bit about JuJu later.
It's funny. Someone asked Carly Irsay about Richardson, and she said, "Well, great potential, and you can see what he might do, but it's going to be about." And she mentioned it twice. How bad does he want it? He can be this if he wants it. Those are words that kind of catch your hearing, just because of being benched last year for 2 games because of the lack of proper preparation.
Strikes me a little bit like a very famous interview that Jim Irsay gave during the halftime or during one of the preseason games about how with Andrew Luck, it's all between what's between the ears.
Right.
It kind of sends those alarm bells up a little bit there.
So again, it's what's crazy is I like this roster.
I do too, man.
Again, they need a linebacker. They need another safety. I'd take another tight end. But none of that matters if the quarterback doesn't play well, either one. And we were talking at practice today, and all they need is moderate quarterback play, whatever that is. Give me Gardner Minshew's season, but about 10% more, 15% more.
Right.
Because look how close that came. You've got a lot of good weapons. Would Dave would like a bigger number one guy?
Right.
Of course, wouldn't we all?
Who wouldn't? Right.
But this is a good receiver group, not great, but a good receiver group. Tyler Warren is going to add a lot.
It's going to change everything for that offense.
And Jonathan Taylor is still a top 5 running back.
And Jonathan Taylor's still JT, right?
Right. And the offensive line, if the two rookies come together, is going to be good. This defense should be very good. But if the quarterback can do so much to help you or to pull you down.
You got they had their minicamp, final day of minicamp today, and you did talk to, or Jones talked.
Right.
And said lots of very interesting things, right?
He said lots of things and didn't say much.
Yeah.
Which we've known that. And I'll post something today or tomorrow. And normally when you talk to guys, all you need, if you're a good writer, which I think I am, you just need a nugget.
Just a little something,
just
right?
Something. And then I can BS my way.
You can expand from there, right?
There you go. Better than BSing. But he just doesn't give you much. And maybe that's the way he needs to be as the new guy in town. But this thing has opened up for him. It just has. Because he talked when he first got here, that fresh start, but he knows it's an open competition. Well, all of a sudden, that open competition,
you're in the prime. You're in the front driver's seat there, man.
So, and he's looked good. He's thrown the ball well. He's already got a pretty good connection with Michael Pittman, with Tyler Warren. I've so many times, whether it's because Warren is the high profile rookie, but he's out there making catches. Pierce, it's a really, really good group. This is probably the best supporting cast he's had.
Oh, I would think so. Yeah.
And it doesn't demand that the quarterback carry a team. It's do your job. Hit Pierce on some deep balls and take shots, but keep the chains moving, hit 3rd and 7, move around in the pocket. So I think this is tailor-made for him. But as we've talked, and we could do a whole podcast, Richardson needs to be the guy, because if he's not, then it creates a whole lot of issues after the season.
Absolutely. And then, gosh, it won't be long before, we'll have to see what pans out here with training camp with Richardson and how the season goes. And maybe he is the day one starter, and it's a little premature to say that he's not going to be. But then, they're going to have to talk contract extension. Not too far in the future.
The 5th-year option next offseason.
5th-year option and extension, all that stuff. I mean, and those are seismic decisions that you have to make.
Because again, if there's a question with Richardson, Daniel Jones is on a 1-year deal.
Right.
Again, we talked about, what if it's Daniel Jones and he goes 10-7 and plays well, and you win the division, you make as a wild card. What do you do at quarterback? You're going to invest heavily in even a semi serious quarterback contract is $40 million,
right?
And then if you do that, then what about Richardson? So it's just it's not a good situation. It'll keep us talking. And again, just from week to week, if Richardson starts and he plays a couple of games and gets dinged up, Jones comes in. And if Jones plays well, then when Richardson's healthy, do you go back to Richardson? It's just not a great situation. They're going to have issues. They're going to have challenges of how once you make he's our quarterback for now decision.
For now. Right.
And I hope to goodness that's what Shane says, because long term is like week to week now with this team. But how you handle it, and if it's Richardson and he's playing well but gets hurt, do you lose your job because of injury? I don't know. But this is a situation that's been created by Richardson's. Everything surrounded him.
Yeah, and it's the health. It's the health. It's the inaccuracy. It's the sum of everything with it. And it's going to put the Colts in a tough spot. But again, we weren't really going to know anything until we get down to training camp and see if they whether they ramp them up or ease them into it or whatever they do.
But that once again, that's going to dwarf everything else. Might he open the preseason on PUP? Well, that would be a big story. Oh, I know.
But that'd be brutal. But it's possible.
Now, again, PUP, you can open him on PUP and then take him off 3 days later.
Right.
But it simply tells you he's not ready yet. Is that better, or is it better to leave him on the active roster and him not practice for the first week?
What it really does mean for our viewers and listeners is a lot of Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones thumbnails for the YouTube videos, because that's what we will be talking about quite a bit.
It's a great talking point, but it just shouldn't be to this level. And when it is, you have problems.
And, we would also like to be talking about an actual quarterback competition with the two of those guys out there. This guy going with the first team, this guy going with the second team, and they're switching around doing different situations. This guy performed this way. This guy performed that this way. And instead, it's, Daniel Jones is taking all the reps because the other guy, Richardson, just physically can't throw right now.
Missed the last 6 practices.
Right. Yeah. Which you know nothing.
Right. And, on the silver lining is that means that Daniel Jones has gotten more reps.
It helps with the install of the new offense for him. But, the things that we knew that Richardson needed to work on, kind of the footwork and the reps and all that stuff to kind of get back on that get the accuracy that he needs in order to play at the level that the Colts need him to play at. We're not getting that in, maybe we get that in training camp, but maybe we don't, as you mentioned. Moving on with Shane Steichen, we did hear from him. He did mention not a huge interesting thing from Steichen, but he did say they were going to approach training camp a little bit differently this year when they do their joint practices with Baltimore and Green Bay. In years past, they've done 2 days of joint practices with them, but they're only going to do the one session. And then he did definitively say, because we wondered, that hung in the air whether they would do another joint practice with Cincinnati in the third week of the preseason. They're not going to do that, which is not atypical for them to not do 3 joint practices. They usually don't do in the first week, and then they'll do in the second and third weeks, or however it worked before. But yeah, they won't be doing that this year.
Their joint practices have been generally 2 days. Here they've almost always been 2 days.
Yeah, almost always 2 days is what I can remember.
At Philly it was 1 day. At Cincy last year was 1 day. Maybe they've decided that second day, it's the players are at the point that they're ready to really get into where there's going to be fighting or whatever.
Right.
And maybe you simply you've done enough to what you need. And what will be interesting too is how that 1 day of joint work impacts how players play in the game. Because in the past they've not played much.
No.
After you have a strong, their whole point is they see more in those.
They got more benefit from the 2 practices.
From the semi-controlled thing than they would in a game. Although, once again, when you've got a new quarterback or if there's competition, the best place to really see it is in a game setting. So it'll be interesting. And he talked about, and I've got to go back and listen to the tape or watch or read the transcripts about how they want to approach some different ways to practice.
Yeah, I wasn't real clear. I didn't have I read the transcript and I listened back to it as well, and I just didn't quite get the context exactly on whether he was talking about day 2 of training camp or whether he was talking about practice during the week or what have you. But he was talking about that they would not have as many walkthroughs, that they would kind of hit practice a little bit harder, and then they were going to throw a lot of different scenarios at the team, what he called sudden change, because he felt that was an area that they really struggled in last season. And if they were to kind of practice this, then maybe in a game situation, they would be better for it.
And maybe this is a case, too, that when you haven't won a season opener since 2013, is it?
I think it is,
the Raiders. And they're generally slow-starting teams where you're always sort of playing catch-up. You try to do any tweak you can to help you out.
Yeah, try to break out of that funk.
Right.
And it is, unfortunately, we've written many stories and talked about this on the podcast many times about the funk that the Colts are in, whether it's, to start the season opener or whether you're looking at, playing at Jacksonville, and you just want to break those hexes, right? You just want to get rid of them.
They're tired of us talking about it. So what you want to say is then
make it stop.
Make it stop. Win in Jacksonville. Win an opener. So there's a lot on the line with the new ownership and the things are more intense now because you have to win, and whatever that level is, I don't know. So it all starts again July 22nd when players report, and then they begin practice. If I'm not mistaken, the first 2 or 3 days are non-contact, more conditioning, and then they get into it. September. What's the opener? September 7th.
Let's see.
With Miami?
I will go to my handy dandy graphic there. September the 7th. Yeah,
it'll be here before we know it, and they just doggone it. The schedule is aligned to getting off to a decent start.
It's all there for them if they can get, and it's a big if, it's a capital I, it's a capital F, but if they can get aligned with what they're doing on quarterback and offense.
And avoid the big injuries. There's always an injury. Last year it was Ebukam, their best pass rusher.
Right.
Second or third day of training camp. You're going to have things. Josh Downs, for crying out loud, gets tackled by Nick Cross.
Nick Cross, our good buddy,
it cost JD some early reps in early games. So it's such a significant season. It's already a season of transition from ownership.
Right.
And now what you want to avoid is a serious transition elsewhere. And the only way to do that is to win. This is not a complicated league. It's a bottom line league, and it's on them to win.
All right. You are listening to the Colts Blue Zone podcast and watching the Colts Blue Zone podcast on Fox 59 now and YouTube. All right. A couple of things that stuck out. We did hear from Jim Bob Cooter and Lou Anarumo this week. And also A.D. Mitchell came up again. And, that's a guy that the Colts invested in, a second draft pick. They loved him so much that they traded down to get him.
They traded down to get Mitchell or Pierce too, didn't they?
Yeah. So, they sure did. 2 years in a row, or 2 drafts that they've done that. But we heard Reggie Wayne talk about A.D. Mitchell a couple of weeks ago, and he was kind of joking, we hadn't gotten into it yet, but Cooter had some interesting things, I thought, to say about his second-year receiver's development, really attacking things this spring. They're still betting on A.D. and kind of striving toward a great practice every single day. And from what I've read from the reports from minicamp, we've seen from Mitchell what we saw last year with the plus of he's finishing some of his plays. Not every one of it. It's not like he's never had a drop or anything like that. But that was the whole bugaboo last season was, this guy gets separation. He gets open, whether you're going short, whether you're going long. But then, we see something out of the corner of his eye, doesn't go for the ball, doesn't make the catch or what have you, get maybe alligator arms or what have you, sometimes is the term that people will use. But, year two, this is big for him. And boy, if he can fit into this offense, it would be great for them.
Talked to Reggie Wayne a couple of weeks about the receivers and with AD, and with AD, it seemed like more than others, it was that he needs to learn how to be a pro, how to prepare as a receiver, as a player at any position, to where you're in a meeting, pay attention. There are things that go on you need to know about, and maybe it's not a surprise that a lot of players as rookies don't understand what it takes when you get to this level. Yes, it's on the field and it's how you perform, but it's how you prepare. So many times, whether it was Edgerrin or Marvin, Edgerrin always said, the game's easy. Games are easy. The hard part's practice. That's when, if you do everything in practice, Monday or Tuesday through Friday or Saturday, then the games is easy. But that takes doing the right things during the week. And maybe that was part of, not maybe, that was part of Richardson's issues last year, is not understanding the level. Maybe you think you're doing things the right way. Because that's what you did in college.
My impression was that he thought he was doing everything that he could, but did not understand that you're not doing everything that you could.
That what you were doing was like 20% of what you should do.
That there are several more levels of preparation that go into being the franchise quarterback that, maybe nobody told him.
Right.
I don't know, but you would have thought that they would have prepared him for that stuff at some point, other than having to publicly call out your young quarterback and say he's got some deficiencies in preparation. But
that's just such a damning thing to have happen is your bench because of your lack of the proper preparation. It just is. But again, I think that sort of was part of Mitchell's problem is he's got so much talent. He reminds me since we're in Pacer country right now. He reminds me of Ben Matherin so much, where he's got talent oozing out of him, and you have to direct it. And I think that from talking to Reggie, he thinks Matherin or Mitchell might be the most talented receiver on the roster, just sheer ability.
I would believe that.
Right.
I mean, again, I saw the separation in games, and not every NFL receiver can do that. The Colts don't have a lot of guys who can just beat a guy one-on-one, but it's the finishing the plays, it's being in the right spots and all that stuff where he struggled.
And all of a sudden, when you make that transition from college to the pros, even though Mitchell played at a high level in playoff games and all that, it is just different.
Yeah, the talent. You're not the best guy out there anymore. Everybody's the best guy out there.
Maybe in college you were the best guy 90% of the time.
Right.
And now everybody, when you face a guy's third corner, he's still the best that you saw in college.
Yeah, still better than the guys that you played against.
But they're not even remotely close to giving up on him at all. We watch him in practice again the last couple of weeks. He just makes plays. He just does. But that has to transition over to games.
So you need to see it in the training camp, then you need to see it in preseason, and then you just need to see it in week 1.
Right. It's such a good group of receivers that they complement each other. Although I think Mitchell is sort of the unicorn because he does all that stuff.
He's everybody, right?
Pittman does this really well. Pierce does this really well. JD does this really well. But Mitchell can do all of it.
Yeah, and you can move him around and get whatever you need.
So if they get the quarterback stabilized, which is always going to be the big caveat, he's poised for a really good year, whatever that again means. Because right now, people need to keep in mind he's running behind Alec Pierce on the depth chart.
Right.
But I think they really think this could be a nice breakout year, whatever that means in numbers. I don't know, but you just want to see him not have plays where he quits on a route or he pulls up on a route or he doesn't extend for the ball, because when we see it in the press box week after week, so do opposing teams.
Right. Absolutely.
And if they see a guy that might shy away from contact, they're going to give him contact to see how bad he wants to play.
He has got to force his way onto the field.
Correct.
Make it a problem for the Colts, so that they don't put him on.
We've got to get. I don't know how we're going to do it. We've got to get this guy in the game because he makes plays.
I just think it's interesting that you think he can drop 27 points in an NBA Finals game off the bench.
That's unbelievable. But you watch it. You just watch him play. It sometimes it just comes so easy for how they're playing.
Just effortless.
Yes, with Matherin and Mitchell, and we see Mitchell out there running routes, and it's just smooth.
That is an interesting comparison. I can tell you that if you think A.D. Mitchell is like Matherin, just the fierce competitiveness of Matherin, and also the willingness to do what your team needs you to do.
Right.
Because you know that Matherin, if he wanted to, he could walk out on the court every night and score 30 points.
Right.
I'm absolutely convinced of that. But that is not what this team requires right now. So it'd be interesting to see what they can do from A.D. Mitchell in that regard.
I think the sky's the limit, and they're patient. I remember going into last year, the criticism of Pierce. Well, you drafted Mitchell because you weren't satisfied with Pierce, and you're patient. Reggie has always been a staunch supporter of Pierce, just as he has been with Mitchell. So it's very interesting. And if anybody can get the best out of these guys, it's Reggie Wayne.
No, Reggie loves this receiver room. I mean, I know that we've said, it's a really good room, maybe not a great room, a group of receivers, but I think Reggie really likes these guys and they trust him enough that I think he can get the best out of them, and we'll just have to see who can get them the ball, and that's kind of been the bugaboo for the Colts for the last few seasons.
Right?
Can anybody get them the ball?
And again, watching without sometimes when you got other issues, you don't focus on some of the more important ones. Michael Pittman looks good.
And should say Pitt left OTAs last week because he banged knees, I think, with somebody.
And he never stays down, and he did.
Right.
But
and that got some concern.
But he's back running, and he just looks smooth and a little quicker. Of course, last year he just couldn't be himself.
No, he had that back issue,
recurring back issue, and he looks good out there now. And again, I'm one of those guys that I wish he were a little more than he is, because I look around the league and I see the Chases and the Jeffersons and all these guys. Pitt's pretty good. One time, whether it was Reggie or someone else compared him to Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen's pretty good.
Yeah, that's good. That's not a bad guy to be, right? He's had a long career.
And again, it's a good group. And I posted something on Pierce, I think it was yesterday, and someone with the team told me that this guy's going to get paid. He's in a contract year.
I believe that.
And whatever that means, I think the top 25 receivers make at least $20 million. And right now, Pierce has made $7 million for his career. So I tell you, when you've got a guy that's averaging for his career like 17 yards a catch, and last year was 22.3, they get paid. Can you imagine the guys at Kansas City or wherever saying, how would he look in our offense? So,
yeah, it gives me nightmares to think about him in some of those other offenses where they have consistent quarterbacks who can get him the ball at will.
So these guys value that. They paid Pitt. Now, whether Pitt would get another contract here, I don't know, with the way that they've sort of prepared the tiering of their draft picks.
Right.
But they are convinced somebody is going to pay Pierce pretty good jack at the end of the season.
And it may end up being the Colts via the franchise tag.
Well, you've always got that hammer to use.
It's there, I suppose, if they need it. Now, let's talk a little bit about JuJu Brents. And early in the podcast, we mentioned I compared him to being the defensive side version of Anthony Richardson, which isn't necessarily a fair comparison, but also not completely unfair either, because we have seen some dynamic things from JuJu when he's been on the field. He gets the balls, he knocks things down, he forces fumbles.
He's got the size and the aggression they want.
He's a good tackler. Unfortunately, he just has not been able to stay on the field for the Colts. And he's entering year 3, and I think that's another reason for the Richardson comparison. They were both drafted in the same years. They had really high RAS scores, which everybody knows we love here on the podcast. And he's got also the added benefit of interest of being a local kid here from Indianapolis, playing for his local team. And so your heart's always kind of tugging for him to be able to play well. And, last week, didn't do a lot of OTAs. We heard a little bit of a groin issue, but he was back at it for minicamp this week.
He has missed more games than Richardson has.
It's amazing, but yes,
I think he's only played 11 games. I think it is. And remember, they were intent on getting him back for some time in the last game last year, and he played 6 plays or whatever it was.
And then he was out.
And we had a groin injury or a hamstring, whatever. He knows that. And I don't know if I'm a Lou Anarumo, I don't know how I approach it with JuJu, because you see that the few times he's been healthy, he's a pretty good player.
Absolutely.
He is. But how can you commit yourself to, he's our 3rd guy or our 4th guy? You can't. So it's a huge year for him. They're not even remotely close to running out of patience with him. But at some point, again, it's the best abilities, availability. And, Daniel Scott, the safety, has missed his first 2 years.
And a guy that it sounds like the Colts want to rely on, right? For the safety position.
Jelani Woods. I mean, at some point.
But how can you, right?
So, but he's a great kid. You pull for him. Again, local kid. But at some point, then stay on the field. And the worst thing that'll be happening, hopefully it doesn't, is in training camp, 2 weeks in, he's got something else. So, but this has got the possibilities of being a really good, deep secondary, and what his presence could do to that group is immense.
Did not think that we would be talking about a deep wide receiving core and a deep secondary for the Colts.
Well, yeah,
but maybe, that's if everybody's healthy.
Maybe one of the reasons they're not all that concerned with the thinness at linebacker is that they're deep in the secondary. Right. Which when's the last time, like you said, when's the last time that you thought, man, this is a deep group?
No.
I can't think of one.
No, not for this Colts franchise. And it probably does help that they've got was it Wohler and Carlisle that give them some additional flexibility. They're kind of hybrid players that can kind of give you a dime linebacker look if you want to do that as well.
But you still need linebackers.
You still need linebackers. The linebacking group is not a deep group.
You're not going to play a 4-7 for crying out loud. So yeah,
I don't know. They might
or 4-1-6. I think I don't know, but no. JuJu could be such a wild card with this defense. I like the defense anyway. I really do. We're going to get to the next guy, Latu, but what JuJu Brents could add as the wild card is really pretty interesting.
Yeah, Anarumo said basically, we want to see what we're going to get from him week in and week out. And I know that that's probably what you would say about anybody on defense, but consistency. And part of consistency is being healthy and being available so that they know that you're going to be in this spot and we know that you're going to be there. Let's talk a little bit about Latu. He'll be entering year 2. Anarumo talked about him a little bit this week and basically said this guy pops off the film. He's got God-given athletic talent and the sky is the limit. Just a reminder, last year he was the 15th overall pick of the draft, 32 tackles, 4 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, fumble recovery in his rookie season. And my goodness, I was looking through getting some photos of Latu, and there are so many of him with the quarterback almost
near
in the
misses or so near close. Hits,
half a step, half a second, and so he's got to close those deals. To be a premier pass rusher in this league, those half steps that he misses have got to become quarterback hits.
And that was one of the first things we talked to him about, whatever day it was this week, is their near misses. Frady used to have that too. He said, "Man, I almost
drove him
3
nuts."
More." And with Latu, I think if he's a half a step slow or he called it a middle of a second short, maybe that was because as a rookie he wasn't totally sure on what he was doing. So there's that just little hesitation. That should be gone this year. And I think that could make a huge difference. A near miss turns into a sack or a forced fumble. He said, goal-wise, it's a sack a game.
Sack a game, huh?
Do the math. Do the math, folks. That's double figures. That's 15 or 16, depending on availability.
So that's Trey Hendrickson production right there.
Right. And again, that's what you want. Yes, you want that defensive end who is the 3-down guy, and he's going to be great against the run. And you need that. Jabal shared. You need that. But give me that guy that's going to give you those 3 plays.
Say when you're up by 3 points and it's 3rd and 7, and all you need is to get a stop, right?
Right.
Close the deal.
And even maybe that's getting there quick to where the quarterback's got to get rid of it too quick,
right?
Or it's closing the game with a strip sack or just a sack or a tip ball. That's the league is all about those as much as coaches and GMs say, it's never about one play.
Yes, it often comes down to one play at the end.
In a game that's got 150 plays, I bet coaches will say, man, these 4 plays, one way or the other. Go back 2 years ago with Gardner Minshew, it comes down to 4th and 1 or 2, whatever it was. So that's what a pass rusher can do. That's what Frady and Mathis did. Chad Bratsky before that. So not knowing what they're going to get from Ebukam because of the Achilles, Kwity Paye is going to be Kwity Paye. He's going to get you 8 or 9 sacks. He's going to be tough against the run.
He'll stuff the run for you,
right?
As well.
But doggone, you need that guy that's going to be the guy.
You need lightning off the edge, right?
And you watch him, and he's a little unique, I guess. Because we talked to him this week, and he had leopard hair.
Okay. So kind of a different look
with the spots.
Yeah.
You don't ask him what you're doing, but I will take unique as long as he gets me a sack a game, as he said. So I'm encouraged by it. I think he had someone showed the stats. Wasn't Jared Verse the defensive rookie of the year?
Yes. Yeah.
And their stats were really, really similar.
They were when we because we talked about the NFL awards on the podcast here, and we noted that really if you give Latu a couple more sacks here and there, they weren't that far off.
Right.
Played similar amount of had similar other stats along those ways. So I don't think at any point did we think that Latu was a miss.
Right.
It's just, man, you saw him get so close, and even on even not necessarily getting the sack. It's just like getting to the making the quarterback rush that throw. It's just and still even a half a second off of doing that.
Right. So I can see a big jump with him and with the new defensive coordinator, and again what he could do as far as elevating a line with Quiddy and Buck and Grover. I think I think this could be a very, very good defensive year, whatever that means. Top 10, I don't know about that, but so much so much we talk about with the offense. It's quarterback driven. The defense is pressure driven. It just is.
So if you can hold teams, I'm not suggesting that the Colts will do this, but if you can hold teams to 16, 17 points a game, you're going to win a lot of your games.
And the way you do that is getting after the quarterback. And yes, stop the run. Okay, I understand that, but because we've seen the first two games last year where teams just was it Houston and Green Bay just 400 yards, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But you change games with pass rush, and if you can amp up the pass rush with the addition of Charvarius Ward and Cam Bynum, and you've got Kenny Moore, it bodes well for what this defense can be. But it starts up front,
and I think that they, we're talking about the secondary more than I ever imagined that we would.
Well, we've talked about him before, but in a negative way.
Right. Another guy, and I don't have any footage of him this time, was Justin Wally, who was a third-round pick out of Minnesota. And that was a pick that kind of had us scratching our heads a little bit. And some of the analysts were like, this guy's going to be a bona fide NFL player. And the other guys are like, this guy's a seventh-round pick or an undrafted free agent. So it really probably for him depends on fit and system and how a team plans to use him. But I was just surprised because he came up both from Steichen and he came up from Anarumo. Of course, I know the reporters are asking, questions about these guys, but, he's getting a fair amount of reps. Steichen said he's been sticky in coverage, which is exactly what you want to hear from a young cornerback. Made a tons of plays, according to Steichen, who is always prone to hyperbole as coach of your Indianapolis Colts. And Rumo said, the first mark of a good corner is how they cover, and whether they're in pads or not in pads, because they're not in pads. And he's done a good job so far. So Wally. Obviously, the Colts, by virtue of the fact they did pick him in the third round, but they're seeing a pretty big role for this kid in their defense.
Well, and it's helped, too, that, when other players are out for whatever reason, he's worked a lot with the first unit. With Jalen Jones has been out, I think, with soft tissue, hamstring, whatever. And then Charvarius Ward's not played 100% because he initially was away with his family.
Right, he didn't do some of the OTA work,
and they eased him in.
Yeah.
And that's meant more of Wally out there. So it's and if you're a rookie, reps. We heard that with, remember, Richardson's rookie year.
Reps.
So and again, you can't really tell how an offensive lineman is playing or how the D-line or whatever works as far as tackles because there's no contact.
Right, they're not hitting each other. So how do you know what they're doing?
But you can tell if a guy's covering. You can tell how a guy's covering, and they're very high on him. And it just reinforces the idea that this is a very deep, knock on wood because injuries.
It could become not very deep very quickly, unfortunately.
But I would rather start early with a really deep line or area, and then if injuries hit, you're sort of prepared for it. But this is a good group, and this kid will get a chance to play.
All right. So as the Colts wrapped up minicamp, this was day 3 of the mandatory minicamp, and then they will be done until July the 22nd? for training camp. They did have some guys that were out. No real surprises here. Zaire Franklin recovering from ankle surgery. Jalen Carlisle is recovering from shoulder surgery. Chat mentioned Jalen Jones, the cornerback there. I'm not sure what his injury was, but you suggested perhaps soft tissue.
When in doubt, soft tissue.
Okay. Daniel Scott, unfortunately, an oft-injured safety that they drafted a couple years ago. David Long Jr., who's a cornerback for them. Samson Ebukam, he's not been participating in like the individual one-on-one.
But he's working. He's working with trainers on the side, which is a good sign.
But he's been seen during the mini camp, kind of running with trainers. They've been observing him, that sort of thing. Maximilian Meng, who's a massive tight end, that's their international player this year, not practicing. I also saw from Kevin Bowen, said Kwity Paye was not out there, at least not yesterday. And then Blake Freeland, the offensive swing tackle guard for the Colts, also not out there very much. And then you said today you noticed the absence of one Braden Smith.
Right. Shane Steichen said he just got dinged up. It didn't sound serious, but we won't know. And there will be no updates for the next 5 or 6 weeks.
And there's no real cause for alarm for a lot of these because, as Chap and I talked before the show, if you have a hangnail in these mini camp situations,
you're not practicing.
You're not going to practice. So they're just going to not take the risk. So
again, one thing that's interesting too is they bring in tryout players, and they brought in Desmond
Ritter, right?
And Shane Steichen sort of downplayed that today. Well, we needed another arm. Well, you could have found an arm.
You can find an arm anywhere, right?
Right. So, and he throws the ball well. And when you don't know what Richardson's status is. I was looking Ritter. I think he's 8-10 or 8-18 as a starter. 8-10, I think it is. So he's played. He was a 3rd round pick of Atlanta a few years ago. So I wouldn't be shocked if they sign him. It won't cost you anything. So there's no downside, and I'm sure they can find a player on the 90-man roster to make a room for him. So we'll see a few tweaks to the roster moving forward when again, like coaches can say, hey, we really have a deficient area here. But overall, good camp. Nothing serious, no serious injuries other than the quarterback.
Yeah.
So, but now there's again downtime. The only news now will be either bad news with an off the field incident, or you'll get the 2nd round pick signed.
We will be monitoring things here for you on the Colts Blue Zone podcast. For Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths, I'm Matt Adams. Thanks for listening on your podcast app of choice and for watching us on YouTube or Fox 59 Now. Catch you later.